been one of the lucky ones. I've had a job since 1979. I haven't been out of a job since 1979. I think in the Ireland of today, that will be and indeed the Ireland of the future, that will become a rarer and rarer thing. If someone leaves school and goes straight into a job and has a job for 30 or 40 years. And I think that's sad. I think there's a whole range of reasons why that happens. And I think that needs to be addressed. I think the whole question of decent work and a living wage needs to be foremost on the agenda. So I was sitting at home last night and on that basis saying to myself, well, why do I got to come here and talk to people who are working in the front line with unemployed workers, unemployed trade unionists? What do I know about it? You know, I have been in a job since 1979. So I was just thinking about it. I wrote a couple of notes down, and I probably don't bore people to death, but I'm going to just refer to them. I'm not going to read them out because I'm not good at reading it, boring enough as it is. But my own union was the old Bar Workers Union. Before we formed Mandate in 1994, we had a great affinity with Centres for the Unemployed. In fact, my assistant general secretary now, Jerry Light, was the coordinator in the Connolly Centre for the Unemployed up in the Coombe. It was a non-affiliated Congress centre at the time. I don't know whether it still is or not. I presume it's still in existence, but we supported that centre for many years. And Jerry came through the ranks of community activism, working in unemployed centres, graduated being a very broad term, graduated into the trade union movement through his activism, and is now the Assistant General Secretary of Mandate Trade Union. So I personally have a very strong affinity with the community work and the activism that you yourselves are involved in. I think we've heard some talk in relation to the recovery of the green shoots. And I think, listen, we'd all like to believe that there are green shoots and there is a recovery on the way. I'm not that convinced, frankly. This economy is still in tatters, wrecked by greed, wrecked by light touch regulation, wrecked by speculation, wrecked by senior bankers, and your members and your organisations have paid the price, the ultimate price in many cases for that. Not only in terms of your jobs, but your health, your mental well-being, your self-respect, etc. And indeed, many have multiple issues in terms of the danger of losing homes, etc. And indeed immigration. So there's a whole kind of tsunami which has been funneled downwards on the most vulnerable in our society, who through no fault of their own have found themselves in a position of unemployment. And from a trade union movement, I'd like to say, certainly from me personally and indeed from the organisation, you know, unemployed workers are unemployed workers, and I would like to I do believe that unemployed trade unionists, and there's a place in the trade union movement for unemployed workers, and that we are all part of the same social progressive movement, looking for a fairer society, for a fairer Ireland, a different Ireland. And I think it's important what the chairperson said. If there is to be a rebuilding, it just simply can't rebuild what collapsed, and that the kings and the queens and the princes of finance get back into their castles again. We have to be a central part of what type of society, what value system is going to be Ireland of the next century or the next couple of decades. And I think the INOU and the trade union movement and other community activist groups right around the country have a vital role to play in that, and we should not allow ourselves to be excluded from that debate. I think also the narrative is very, very dangerous. The narrative in terms of unemployed people, the narrative in terms of seen as a problem, seen as we must have activation programs, as if somehow or other we're not active or not proactive, or somehow we need to be pushed to move, that we need to move people off the dole as if they're refusing to move, that we need to cajole, to force, to bribe people off the dole. I mean, I honestly believe that the vast majority of Irish people are not lazy. We had full employment here, what, 8 years ago. People want to work, but they want to work for decent jobs. They want to work for a living wage. They want to work to be able to put food and shelter on the table. And too often the jobs that have been spoken about at the moment, too often the jobs, and I know coming to the general sector, the retail sector again. They're badly paid, they're part-time, they're precarious, they don't offer a decent living wage, you don't know from on 0-hour contracts, you don't know from one end of the week, from one week to the next week, how much you're going to earn. That's not a recovery. That's a race to the bottom. And the same cheerleaders and the same media that are sniping and demonising and demonising unemployed workers are the same people who are demonising collectivism, the trade union movement, decency at work, decent worker standards, JLCs being attacked, minimum wage being attacked, the registered employment being attacked. It's all in an effort, in a race to the bottom. It's pitting unemployed workers and welfare recipients against low-paid workers in a horrible race that somehow is covered up by people by saying it's all about competitiveness, it's all about flexibility. Well, it's not. What we've created here is one of the most unequal societies in Europe. There's still a lot of wealth in this country, but it's held in very few hands. I mean, the top 100 or the top 250 people, wealthiest people in Ireland, have actually increased their wealth over the period of the so-called recession. So, I mean, it's about policies and about policy decisions and about choices. And governments, the successive governments, have always stood beside the upper class, have always stood beside capital, have never made decisions in favour of workers or labour. I think that needs to be challenged, and I think, quite frankly, I think some of the election results over the last couple of days are challenging that, are challenging it very, very severely. And I think that is a welcome opportunity where this country and its political class must reassess what type of an Ireland do they want for the next decades and the next century. And I think, you know, you and I and community groups and activists right around the country need to be central part of that debate. The job activation schemes, the Jobs Bridge, my own union has a huge problem with Jobs Bridge. They're exploitative employers and opportunistic employers who are exploiting young, vulnerable workers into department stores, into shops, into corner shops, into petrol stations, and using them and abusing them, and then on a conveyor belt of more and more and more and more. They're displacing half-decent jobs, let's say, but they certainly are displacing jobs, and we have a huge difficulty with it. The scheme, those are pathways, which you get €20 on top of your dole for working in for 20 hours a week. I mean, that in itself values the work of unemployed workers and unemployed trade unions at €1 an hour. Now, what dignity is there in going in to a local authority and having your labour valued at €1 an hour over and above what you're entitled to? There's very little dignity. In fact, it nearly causes division. So, a lot of these schemes are focused on the individual as the problem, rather than the economy as the problem. And the economy's failure to create decent jobs, decent wealth, and a decent well-being for all its citizens equally. So that's something I think that needs to be actually dealt with very, very quickly and highlighted. I just think that, as I said, you know, I haven't been unemployed since 1979. But my family has been touched by it. I have 3 children, 29, 25 and 21 next week. And they've been in and out of work. Son's an apprentice electrician, obviously the construction trade has collapsed. My daughter was a retail worker. My other son has just left school recently and is unemployed. But every one of them, in their interaction, and I'm not saying, by the way, the people in the Department of Social Welfare who work in the counters are bad people, etc., etc. They're not. They're doing a job under very difficult circumstances. But every one of them, of my children, who had an interaction with the system, found it negative. Every one of them found it negative. None of them came back and felt that anyone was trying to help. They felt the minute they walked in, there was a culture that you're the problem, you're coming in here, and you're not really looking for work. That's the way they felt. And that's their first impressions. And everyone said, I never want to go back down there again. Ever, ever, ever want to go back down there again. So there is an issue. There is that culture that has been created over many decades, that somehow or other unemployed workers and unemployed trade unionists are the problem and have to be activated or moved on somewhere, rather than focusing on the real problem. The real problem is this country, this constitution has failed miserably its citizens. It has failed to provide decent jobs, decent wages, and means that people can live in dignity and respect. So I think that needs to be a central theme of your conference here today. As I said, just in terms of the underlying philosophy and culture, I think that you yourselves have a huge role to play. I think sometimes the organisation and unemployed feel a little bit afraid to come out from under the work sometimes, in that, you know, afraid of people pointing the finger at them as that you're all the same or something, like, you know. There's loads of work if you look for it, you know. But there's a real opportunity that you're part of a class struggle. In fact, you're probably the first victims of a class warfare. And by the way, our class is not winning this war. Our class is not winning this war. The working class is not winning this war. The upper class are winning this war. The financial class is winning this war. The elite class are winning this war. Warren Buffett is a multi-billionaire investor. He knows it. He said it publicly. There is a class war, he said, and my class is winning. And he knows that right across the globe, right across Europe. There's 26 million workers unemployed across Europe. Many of them long term, like in Ireland. Many of them young workers, like in Ireland. Many of them forced to immigrate, like in Ireland. So their class is winning. And we need to fight back, and we need to fight back smarter. And I honestly believe that a mobilisation of the unemployed needs to take place. You can engage with the apparatus of the state about the mechanics of job bridge and jobs paths and everything else, and that's important, as we do with employers about wages and conditions of employment. But there is another struggle taking place, and that struggle is what sort of society and what value system is going to dominate for the next couple of decades. And I think if we can mobilise the unemployed, if we can mobilise workers, if we can mobilise the community sector, I think we have an important stake that we can shape for my kids, for my grandkids, for your kids, for your grandkids. We can shape a different Ireland than what we have at the moment, a different Ireland than what we've gone through. So I'd like just to say to you maybe finally by winding up, and I'm not lecturing anyone, so listen, I don't have the inside story, I don't have all the answers. In fact, I have more questions than answers. I've made more mistakes in my own 34 years with trade union movement than I care to remember. But I'd just like to say that your voice and your vision is as legitimate as anybody else's. It's as legitimate as the trade union movements, it's as legitimate as the governments, it's as legitimate as the employers. And anything that Irish Congress of Trade Unions can do to be of assistance to you, to raise your voice and to be heard, we certainly will do. I hope you continue to shout loud, you just continue to be proud of what you are, unemployed workers, unemployed trade unionists, community activists, people with a vision, and I believe that our struggle will win. So thank you very much for asking.